In this video, we are going to look at a virtually brand new camcorder from 1985, one that basically has never been used, and I'm going to unbox it for you right now. This is the Sony CCD-V8AF. This is the accessory box that it came with. I'm going to give you a little history about this camcorder. We're going to take a look at its functions and test it out in the field. Sony's debut to the 8mm format, a full-size camera that's very attractive and has this front faceplate to protect the lens. A very professional looking, attractive camera with lots of buttons and switches for manual controls. Let's take a look at what's inside the accessories. You have your warranty card there, and you also have your original battery unopened. It's funny to see it in a box like that. A 30-minute 8mm tape, plus some adapters and the charger. The paperwork that's included is the instruction manual, and this camera also has the sales receipt. Some person spent $1,284 in 1985, but in today's dollars, that's almost $3,500, and that ain't cheap. Remember, stickers were in style in the 80s, and this camera comes with plenty of them. And carrying cases for camcorders were also in style, and this one has one as well. You just have to know how to put the camera in the case. It has to go in a certain way, or the case won't close. But when it does, it makes for great transport. But this Sony model is actually not the very first 8mm camcorder. It's this one, this strange-looking Kodak model. It didn't actually sell very well, but I do have one of these units, and be sure to subscribe for an upcoming review of this dinosaur.
It's a dinosaur.
Sony's first 8mm camcorder was actually the CCD-V8, while as this one is the 8AF. That stands for autofocus, something the older beta movies did not have. You couldn't even watch your tapes back. The V8 was Sony's answer to JVC's innovative GR-C1, made famous in the Back to the Future movie. But bet you didn't know that the V8 was in a movie of its own.
And what do you see when you open your eyes?
Well, I see a Sony CCD-V8AF. But before we take a look at the controls and features of the camera, let's test it out against that JVC GR-C1 and see how the image quality compares. Okay, first, here is the JVC GR-C1, and take a look at the very flat pastel-y type colors. It's almost black and white. And now we'll take a look at the CCD-V8. I don't think I had the focus spot on, so just pay attention here to the color difference, and you can see the greens are a lot richer and the saturation difference is pretty dramatic. So let's see how far the technology has come. Here is the same scene in 4K, shot with the Sony A7 IV, their latest and greatest mirrorless. While it was marketed as a consumer camera, the V8 offered a lot of controls. To turn the camera on, you press that camera power button. I'll let you hear some of the sounds this camera makes, but to start recording, you just hit the red button and you can see the counter move forward until you hit the red button again to stop recording. The camera allows you to watch your footage back, and there's a full set of controls from rewind to fast forward to stop and play, all with their own unique sound. The electronic viewfinder swivels out of the way, so it makes it easier to put the camera in a bag. And the viewfinder is fully detachable if you need. There's a nice window so you can see the cassette moving, and you can see how much tape is remaining. Nice handy feature. Camcorders back in the 80s had black and white viewfinders, and this was no exception, so you're not going to see your image in living color. But the viewfinder does tilt to help you get creative angles, and Sony included a nice legend so you can see what the lights mean inside the viewfinder. The camera also has a headphone jack, but they called it an earphone jack, and the hot shoe is included as well. A word about battery power. If the battery that you have says Sony on it, forget it, it's not going to work because it was an original battery and was manufactured way too many years ago. Any chance of these batteries working is an off-brand, like I have something called Telepower here, or Empire made these batteries too, but they don't even make them anymore, so they're really tough to get. You have to get a battery rebuilt, or the other option is that you could power the battery with this interesting adapter that you can find that goes into the front, but the lead you can put it into like a 12-volt battery pack and have external battery, in which case you are carrying around an extra battery. but it is an option as well, or you could just power it off AC. The way you put the batteries in, there is a little compartment in front. You got to make sure it's in the right way. And it snaps right in. I'm lucky that these batteries are still going a little longer than I thought. Now, to charge the battery is really a strange process. It goes into this dual sort of bay where the AC version goes on one side and the battery goes on the other, and then you just plug it in. It's a very weird system, but hey, this is vintage, right?
Vintage? Be specific.
Well, okay. Well, it records with 8mm tapes. Is that vintage enough for you?
No question about it.
The camera has a zoom, either a power zoom, or you can zoom manually with a rocker switch. And don't be surprised if you see online a very similar model by Kyocera, which is actually the exact same camera. Now, if you want to watch what you recorded on a TV, you have to attach the connector which comes with the camera. They put the connector in a very awkward place, which is at the bottom. There's a little door here that opens, and this module connects right to it like that. This is Kyocera brand, but it's the exact same thing. And then just connect your outputs either into your TV or into your VCR, which can be routed into your TV. Sony also included a video in, so in case you wanted to record an outside signal into the camera, you could. Now, when the camera was reviewed by Video Magazine in 1985, they found the video horizontal resolution was only about 240 lines. The fact is, 8mm was about the same sharpness as VHS tape, but despite this, hundreds of 8mm camcorders were introduced, and it was an extremely successful format, followed by Hi8, which actually bumped the resolution to 400 lines. Around the turn of the century, Sony introduced Digital 8, another sub-format which uses the same tape, but is not really compatible with Hi8 and regular 8, and this caused a lot of confusion as to what machine can play which. Only a few units actually could play all three formats, such as this model made by Sony, which would play regular 8, Hi8, as well as Digital 8. Now let's go into the field. Literally the field. And thanks to our model Karen for helping us out in this video. I'm sure there's no other camera you'd rather be holding.
Well, I could have had a V8.
Wow, I could have had a V8.
It occurred to me that a really great way to see the CCD-V8 in action is by using another V8 to tape it. And by chance, I happen to have a second V8, so I used that to tape my model Karen shooting me while I shoot her. Our model Karen is like a statue. Are you moving? Are you moving?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm trying to keep you in the frame.
That's a great job. Even though the camera is not particularly small, since you can rest it on your shoulder, it's easy to carry around even for a smaller framed individual. Can you imagine that you're in 1985 now?
Yep.
What does it feel like?
1985.
That's some imagination you've got.
Here's a test of the backlight function.
What's happening?
This is backlight, and this is backlight on and backlight off, and you can see the backlight function does do something. Now let's make a comparison to see how the V8 picks up the red colors in this plant compared to a little more modern technology in iPhone 11 Pro. Here is some more sample footage from the CCD-V8AF. Now, surprisingly, although they didn't have it in the day, this camera is actually very good for vlogging and very convenient. Yes, we're walking along the path here, and this is not, you just have to hold it at arm's length like this, and if your arm doesn't fall off, you're fine. But you can see that if you wanted to use it as a vlogging cam, you certainly can. Cuckoo! Cuckoo! The old method of measuring a camcorder's low-light performance was called lux, and this camera received a rating of 19 lux. So let's see how that compares to a more modern mirrorless camera. So in testing the low light of the camera, let's do it side by side with a Sony Alpha 1, a year 2020 camera with one of the most modern sensors to get a real perspective of where we've come in the last, 35, 40 years or so. So that shoot that was out in the field, on one of the V8s, the audio did not get recorded. It actually came out like this. So let's see if we can't figure out what went wrong here. No audio. Now, the mic does detach. It's possible that the actual mic went bad or something internal in the audio circuitry went bad, which would be even a bigger problem. I happen to have an external mic. So what we'll do is we'll attach this external mic to the camera and see if that fixes the problem. The microphone connector has two holes. So one it looks like it's for audio and one maybe for power. This microphone only has one connector. However, it is a powered mic. So let's find out. And what we'll do is we'll use the adapter to monitor the audio coming out to see what's going on. We'll put the old microphone on, the original mic. Tapping it. Nothing is really coming through, which indicates there is definitely a problem with the audio. So now let's go ahead and put on the external shotgun mic that I have here. Put it in the on position and let's attach it. One of the audio leads. That's a good sound. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing 1, 2. So in fact, it was this microphone that somehow actually just went bad. So that means that if you picked up another CCD-V8, even for parts, there's a good chance that the microphone on the other one might work, so you could just swap it out. Again, it's nice that it's removable, or you could just use an external mic. There is a hot shoe right on top of the camera, so you could use a modern external mic on a vintage 80s camcorder. Why not? I also had a recent incident where the camera just would not eject the tape. It looked like it was going to be stuck in there. I kept hitting the button and it was just whirring and whirring and whirring and could not get it out. Eventually, it did eject, but it took a while and it had me very concerned. But that's what happens sometimes with vintage camcorders. They're a little like grumpy old men. And
Like you?
Sorry?
Nothing.
Another issue with these cameras, especially the older Sony CCD models, is something called CCD rot. That's a term I made up. But if you notice, they're like in this edge of the screens, there's some distortion or it looks like decay. And that is just the CCD or something happening over time. It almost looks like a hazy effect or dirt, but it's not dirt. Some other cameras really can have it bad, especially this one. So if you're going to buy this one on eBay, just be careful because you could wind up with one with a Vaseline over the lens. That is what it looks like. And that's why it's really important to have the seller test it for you. Please check out my other video on buying vintage camcorders on eBay for that. With the V8, because it has a black and white viewfinder, you have to be mindful of white balance. There is a white lens cover, for the purpose of which is to manually white balance. So let's try that now and see how that looks compared to a preset. This is the manual white balance position here. It looks a little bluish. Switching to the sun position. We're back to the sun position. Right? Looks better to me. Manually focusing this camera is actually easier and a little quicker than autofocus, well, even though this is an autofocus camera, but you may find that after all these years the autofocus is really sluggish or doesn't even work at all. But it's actually pretty easy to manually focus. You can clearly see the image in the viewfinder.
So, how much better is the quality of this camera as opposed to modern technology?
Actually, it's a lot worse, to be honest with you.
Well, then why would anyone be crazy enough to use this kind of camera?
Don't be insulting my subscribers, please.
No, I was just meaning to insult you.
I mean, that's destroying my life. No respect. I don't get no respect at all. Are you kidding?
So, are you sold on this camera yet? Well, if so, you're in luck, because they are not in short supply like on eBay. Sony must have sold a lot of them in the day because there's a lot to be found. And the good thing is, they don't really suffer from that leaky cap issue. You may find issues with the camera. Like I said, one of the biggest ones is that foggy effect due to the CCD going bad over the years. So be sure to question the seller, have him test the camera. And do yourself a favor, if you haven't already, check out my video about tips on buying vintage camcorders online to give you some helpful advice as to what to speak to the seller about before you actually hit that buy button. So how much should you pay? Well, prices are all over the place. But if you pick up a working camera with accessories for $100 or less, you got a pretty good deal. So if you're looking to create that vintage 80s look and do so with a pretty famous camera that actually launched the 8mm revolution, this probably is the camera for you. If you decide to buy another camera instead, well, you may just say to yourself,
Wow, I could have had a V8.
if you've gotten something out of this video, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help the channel. More videos on the way on vintage tech and modern tech too. Everything is covered on Tech to Remember. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.